All right, hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our regenerative agriculture webinar series. This one is all about soil chemistry and part of our very first webinar series that we're running at Grounded. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Inga Locke and I'm COO at Grounded. On the agenda for today is a brief introduction to Grounded, and then I'll hand over to Daniel Fourie. For anyone who's not familiar with Daniel, he is our regenerative agriculture enthusiast, a self-declared soil nerd, as are many of us, I'm sure, watching this or on this call. And he does have significant expertise in composting and soil microbiology. So really looking forward to today's session all about soil chemistry. For those of you who missed the first webinar in the series, it was on soil structure, and the link to that recording is available. You can find that on our LinkedIn page, and I'll also include that link on the follow-up email that'll come through after this to share the recording. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll tackle those towards the end of the webinar. And otherwise, it's very, very informal and relaxed, and we look forward to hearing a lot more about soil chemistry. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and provide a brief introduction to Grounded. A quick check that everybody can see my screen. Cool. So a little bit about Grounded and who we are. This is our very diverse team based mostly in South Africa, where our main base is, also in Zambia, Tanzania, and in the Netherlands. Essentially, what Grounded does is we provide regenerative agriculture support to farmers. We build companies that we refer to as operating companies that then process those ingredients, and then we sell to both local and international markets. We try to access premium markets so that we can fairly reward everybody across the value chain. And some of the companies that we have built from scratch are shown on the slide across essential oils and dried herbs, herbal teas, vegetables, and spices. We've recently taken an equity stake in a 4th operating company in Tanzania, and that's a very exciting project all about spices. We have also found that actually accessing those premium markets can be quite tricky, and simultaneously for ethical brands, it can be tricky to access some of the ingredients that we provide via our farmers. So we have launched Grounded Ingredients, where we're essentially reinventing the middleman, and it's a wholesale platform for those ethical brands to be able to access sustainable and regenerative agriculture ingredients. That's it from me in terms of the quick Grounded introduction. Anybody who wants any additional information, please check out our website, grounded.co.za, and groundedingredients.com. Daniel, I'm going to hand over to you, and we will pick up any questions that we might get towards the end.
Thanks, Inga. Nikki's also letting me know now that they can't get into the webinar, so I don't know if there's an issue with the link.
Me as well.
You also couldn't get in?
No, we all can't get in. And probably if you're not registered in time, there's no way to quickly register and jump on the call.
Oh, I will share the recording for everybody afterwards, because I'm not entirely sure how to fix that one right now.
People should register an hour before the time, at least. In any case, I'm happy to go on. Then, thank you very much for the introduction, Inga. I appreciate it. So today, I'm going to have a quick run through soil chemistry. It is not exactly something that I'm an expert at. Like Inga mentioned, I'm more on the soil microbiology side of things. But I do have a background in biochemistry, so I'm going to call it soil biochemistry today. And I'm not going to go into all the more technical parts of the traditional soil chemistry, but look more at some of the new science that's coming out to support the findings from regenerative agriculture practitioners on why they're actually starting to be effective, even though they don't follow traditional soil chemistry practices, and they can still get the same results. So today, I'm going to keep it quite simple. I'm going to just run through what plants eat, or how plants eat as well. What are soil plant available nutrients in the soil, and then how do you change or increase these available nutrients in the soil. Can you jump on to the next one, please, Inga? Okay, so this diagram over here is pretty much the traditional view of soil, of plant nutrition. It's the idea is that you've got ions, which are positively or negatively charged elements in the soil that are in solution, so they are reactive, and they can exchange from the soil solution into the plant through a mechanism. It's called a proton pump. So the plant pushes out hydrogen ions, and in exchange it takes in mineral elements like magnesium and calcium. And this was the prevalent view on soil chemistry for the majority of the century, and thus it supports the whole chemical farming industry, because all chemical fertilizers are highly soluble ions in these forms. And so if you put them onto the soil, they immediately dissolve into the solution and become immediately plant available. So if you go to the next slide, please. The thing is that view of soil chemistry ignores the other elements in the soil, which is the biology and the organic matter and the structure of the soil. And it has been heavily criticized in the last while, and alternative mechanisms are being looked at. So one of the more exciting mechanisms on how plants actually take nutrients in is it's fairly recent research that's being done into a thing called rhizophagy. So rhizophagy is where plant roots actually absorb bacteria, then they dissolve the cell wall of the bacteria, take all the nutrients from that bacteria, put its cell wall back together, and then throw it back out into the soil solution. And if you want to compare it, it's as if the plants are actually farming these microbes, because in these microbes, you can see in image 2 over here, they all surrounding that plant root, and the plant attracts them with sugars that it's putting out, and then essentially eats them up and takes their nutrients, and then spits them back out into the soil to accumulate nutrients again. Yeah, obviously, some of them don't survive, but this is one of the more exciting new mechanisms on how plants actually take in nutrients. It's very important because when you look at these nutrients, a pure ion, like a calcium ion, it takes a lot of energy for the plant to run that proton pump to bring the calcium in, and then it needs to stabilize that calcium ion into an organic molecule. So usually it will react it with something like an acetic or citric acid that then it becomes a stable organic molecule, and then it can go up into the plant. Whereas a biological mechanism like this, the plant actually receives a lot more nutrients at once, and it also, all those nutrients are already in a biologically stable form. So it's a far more efficient way for the plant to actually take in nutrients. Yeah, then you can go over to the next slide, please, Inga. So the other mechanism is also a microbial facilitated absorption of nutrients, but in this case, it's with symbiotic microorganisms that have actually let's say they've gone the step higher than the other bacteria that just get farmed, and they've decided to trade with the plant, where they have evolved to be able to take sugars from the plant and exchange these sugars for nutrients that they either fix themselves or can accumulate from the environment. And here the most well-known example is probably Rhizobium, which are nitrogen-fixing bacteria that associate with legume roots. And they take atmospheric nitrogen and change it into a nitrate or an ammonium form, and then it actually becomes goes into a biological form. So it would become an amine, which is the precursor for a protein molecule. So once again, it's this bacteria then does the hard work of stabilizing that iron into an organic molecule that's already much more efficient for the plant to use. And the plant exchanges sugars that it can very easily produce through photosynthesis for those nutrients. Yeah, and then it's a more of a trade than a steel transaction like what Rhizophage is, but it's very efficient for the plant to work with these symbiotic organisms. And Rhizobium is one example. Mycorrhiza is another huge group of beneficial fungi that associate with plant roots, and they are most well known for collecting phosphorus from the soil for the plant, but they actually collect a host of different nutrients for the plant as well, and trade them for these sugars from the plant. So you can go to the next slide. What are these nutrients and what is a plant available nutrient? I've gone into a little bit of how these plants eat, but now what they eat. So traditionally, cation exchange capacity is what's used to define soil fertility, and these positively charged ions in the soil, as I explained, these are the nutrients that the plant actually has to take up. They adhere to the surface of soil particles. So if you imagine a sand, usually a clay particle, there's an equilibrium that exists, and these particles sit on that surface between the soil solution, which is water. All soils have a certain amount of water, and along the surface of this clay particle. Now, these ions here are what are traditionally tested for in soil chemistry analysis, where we strip all of these ions off the surface of the soil, and that is termed exchangeable nutrients. What isn't tested for, and which is often forgotten or ignored, is that this soil particle is actually made up of all of these ions. They are just stabilized in a form that they are not in an ionic form. So they are in a crystal, usually, or as an insoluble precipitate, and they cannot go into the soil solution. But there's usually in the order of 1,000 to 100,000 times more of these nutrients trapped in the soil particle itself than what we can actually test for on the surface of the soil. So as a traditional soil analysis is very misleading because it only gives you an idea of what this thin film contains. So you can jump to the next slide. So as I said, the view is starting to change from this idea that plants actually just take in these protons themselves, and biologically facilitated nutrient absorption is becoming more and more the idea when we look at soil chemistry. So bacteria actually have several mechanisms that they can dissolve those soil minerals, where, like I said, that huge stockpile of nutrients lie that aren't available. So inorganic, organic acids, and then these ions will come loose. So in that dissolving process, and then they usually are actually first uptaken by the bacteria or the microorganisms doing that work, and then they will follow a channel directly through to the plant. So soil biology is actually critical to release these nutrients. It's a sort of process called weathering, and it's what people say builds soil. It's the process that builds soil over millions of years, is this weathering process. But newer research is showing that it actually can happen fairly quickly. It doesn't have to take millions of years. So you can jump to the next slide, please, Inga. So finally, the last place where nutrients are available, besides for that, that portion of very soluble nutrients on the surface of the clay, the cation exchange, and the minerals inside the rock particles themselves, is any nutrients stuck in organic matter. So organic matter is essentially, you are what you eat. Well, plants want to eat what they are. So all the plant material goes back into the soil, anything that's not removed off of the field, and that already has all of the nutrients that the plant could possibly want, because it is what the plant is made up of. And through a process called mineralization, once again, microorganisms break down these nutrients. They take the sugars out. So the more complex sugars that survive, like the cellulose and other sugars, they'll break those down as an energy source, and they'll release nitrates and potassium, sulfur, all those mineral elements as a waste byproduct, which the plants then take up again. So those are the three main sources of nutrients in the soil. And obviously, when you add fertilizers, you either add them in the first form, which is as a very soluble iron, or in the third form, which is an organic molecule. Actually, some fertilizers, even in the second form, like rock phosphate or gypsum, which are mined minerals that you add to the soil and get weathered slowly in the soil to release their nutrients. So then you can jump to the next slide, please, Inga. So how do you then actually increase your available nutrients in the soil? Balance is the key. So traditional soil chemistry has always looked at trying to establish a balance in the soil to make sure that all the nutrients are available to the plants in the right ratios. This, for instance, is called Mulder's chart, and it shows how some elements interact and are either antagonistic, which means they suppress other elements from being plant available, or they stimulatory, and that means that they actually make other elements much more available to plants. And when you test your soil and then over-fertilize, or when you over-fertilize without testing your soil, the chances are that you're pushing one element too high and another element suffers as a result of it. So it's a very fine balance. And there's quite a few theories. For instance, the Albrecht method, which is developed by a famous agronomist in America, one of the forefathers of soil chemistry, looked at balancing the ratios of certain nutrients to each other. Now, it is important, this balance, but like I said, thinking is changing about how the soil reacts and actually works. And the balance is definitely important, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you look at when you're looking to increase your available nutrients. So you can go to the next slide, please, Inga. So one of the more important things is to actually then feed these soil microorganisms that do the work. So active carbon is that portion of soil carbon that is actually being exchanged. It's like the money of the soil world. It makes that soil world go around, So the plants give off root exudates, which are sugars and bits of fats and things like that. And they attract these bacteria to the roots. The bacteria are then either eaten, like as in rhizophagy, or some of the other bacteria have become smart and they trade the plant sugars for nutrients to avoid being eaten. So to cultivate a good rhizobiome, that's like the microbial, the microbiome around your root system, is an essential part of increasing nutrient availability to your plants, because essentially you are increasing the workers that can make these nutrients available to your plants. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you've got healthy living roots in the soil all the time, or as long as possible, throughout the growing year, not just in the harvest season. So you can go to the next slide. Another way to increase that, and this is add on to the active carbon portion, is to feed your plants directly so that you stimulate them to produce more photosynthates, which is more sugars, and the plants will actually then feed the roots. So what I've observed in the past is that when you've got a plant that's showing a deficiency, then sometimes it's more efficient to treat that plant with a foliar feed so that it can quickly build up some nutrient reserves, and that plant will then actually trade with specific organisms in the soil for that nutrient that is short. And you'll often find that nutrient deficiency disappears after a short while, just because you fed the plants and the plants fed the microorganisms. Brix is a good measure of this. So Brix is, you measure essentially how much sugars the plants are producing. And those sugars are a good indication. Obviously, the higher the sugars are, the more is being fed to the bacteria. So something like 50% of all the sugars that a plant produces on average will get sent down into the root system to go out as active carbon to these microorganisms. And at times in the plant's growing cycle, that could be as high as 80% of the sugars going out. And then the last slide, please, Inga. So the last step, or the last piece of advice for increasing your available nutrients, is to actually not over-fertilize. Soil microorganisms are very, very sensitive to extreme changes in their environment. And you can imagine if someone dumps 300 kilograms of salt on top of you, you're not going to be very happy for very long. And the same goes with the microorganisms. They have got a single cell wall that protects them from the environment. And if you change the osmotic pressure, which is essentially just how much salt is dissolved in the water, then you suck the water out of those microorganisms and you kill them. And so excess fertilizer often is far more damaging to long-term nutrient availability, because you destroy these populations of microorganisms who are actually the ones having to do the work to make those nutrients available to your plants. And in fact, recent studies have shown that on GM corn, which are grown, I mean, they've got high yields, but they're grown with very high levels of nitrate fertilizer, that the population of bacteria in the root system has shifted to be more denitrifying bacteria. So bacteria that their function in the ecosystem is to actually break down nitrogen compounds into nitrates, which then leach out of the soil, because the plants are actually now paying these bacteria sugar money to get rid of excess nitrogen in their root zones, because we are so prone to over-fertilizing. So you should rather focus on building a long-term strong microbial population to make these nutrients available, and avoid short-term quick fixes with chemical fertilizers. Yeah, and unless you follow that route of foliar feeding. So you can go to the last slide then, please, Inga. In summary, plants require soluble mineral ions, but they also require organically stabilized nutrients from microorganisms. This is what plants eat, and it's more and more clear that these organically stabilized nutrients from microbes are the preferred food for plants. You can compare it to sweets and Coke for the mineral ions versus like a healthy avocado and rye bread for the organically stabilized nutrients. It might not be tasty in the long run, in the short term, but it's much more healthy in the long run for your plants. Then available nutrients are usually measured as these mineral ions that are in a form that the plant can easily absorb, but there are multiple mechanisms how these mineral ions are entering into the plant. And once again, soil microorganisms are showing themselves to be we are observing that they are actually the preferred route for these ions to actually enter the plants. And then finally, soil organic matter and soil microorganisms greatly assist in increasing the amount of available nutrients to plants, and should rather be the focus of any fertilization strategies to build organic matter and microorganisms rather than fertilize to yields or fertilize to removal rates. So yeah, it's that for my little bit on soil chemistry or soil biochemistry.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for taking us through that. I'm going to stop sharing and quickly check if there are any questions. I just want to also, for the recording's sake, apologize to everybody who's had trouble accessing the link. I know there were a few of our team members who've struggled. I will share the recording with everybody who's signed up and figure out how to do that better for the next one. So sorry about that. For the few people who are live on the recording, are there any questions for Daniel about what he spoke about soil chemistry today?
Thanks, Daniel. I just had one question. If, let's say, a farmer that's used to, working with a lot of fertilizer on a year-to-year basis, and he or she is interested in transitioning to less intensive use of fertilizer, what's the way to go?
Well, the best way is to actually stimulate the biology as much as possible. And actually inoculate your soil with as much biology as possible. Often very intensive chemical systems, there's a lot of the fertilizer that farmers are putting in becomes insoluble very quickly. So these farmers don't realize it, but they've been building a huge bank account of fertilizers that have become insoluble because that equilibrium exists. You can't have more than a certain amount of fertilizer active in your soil. And so I've often seen it where farmers start with something like compost teas. They don't put any fertilizer down. They put down a lot of compost teas or compost extracts or inoculate with various microbes, and they have record yields that first year because they've just released all of that stored up chemistry over there. But then often they have a big dip after that. So I usually, when I work with farmers, is I help them to lower their chemical inputs, change over to chemical inputs that are less damaging for microorganisms. So some forms of fertilizer have very high salt indexes and they're very damaging to organisms, whereas other fertilizers are, let's say, more softer fertilizers and they're not so damaging. And then to work on a strategy to build up that organic matter and the microorganism population. Often if you have very low organic matter, then it will take a long time for you to get to a point where you can transition to a zero input system or a low input system away from chemical fertilizers. So, yeah.
Thanks. That makes sense. Thanks, Daniel.
No problem. Tekla, yeah, I can share. I'll share the link about the GM maize. I'll try and find it again.
Just Daniel, just for the recording, I don't know if they would be able to see the question. The question was just, can you share the article about GM maize bacteria that he spoke about? Super interesting. If you can share that with me, I'll include it in the email follow-up with the recording.
I will do so. I think it was the University of Illinois, something in America, that did the study, but I will find it and I'll share it.
Excellent. All right, I think that's everything we had time for in this lunchtime bite-sized webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and Daniel, for your time. And just one quick point, I think our next webinar will be in the coming weeks. We'll post about it on our social channels and let you all know. Daniel, could you just tell us what the topic is of the next one in the soil series?
So the last one will be about soil biology. And we'll soon release another blog on soil biology, and it will probably talk a little bit more about your friends inside soil. So the different microorganisms that exist within the soil and some of their roles and responsibilities. It's like having a little workforce down there for you, and how you can work with them for better soil fertility and performance, plant performance. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.